Singapore Changi Airport, Artist Information Sierra, time 1717 Zulu, wind 350 at 10, visibility 21, temperature 26, dew point 23, QNH 1010 remarks, no intersection departures, no pattern work, no light aircraft accepted at this time landing runways 2 left and 2 center, departing runways 2 left and 2 center, advise on initial contact you, have information Sierra. Singapore Changi Airport, Artist Information Sierra, time 17.
Singapore 254, taxi to E24 via. Taxiing to E24 via, Singapore 254.
Singapore Changi ground, November 404 Zulu Lima, ready to taxi to runway 2 left with information Sierra.
Singapore 478 Super, request permission to cross runway 2 center. November 404 Zulu Lima, runway 2 left, taxi via Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready. Shamrock 220 Super, you're on an active airport, please contact Singapore Changi ground on 124.3.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Whiskey 10, November 404 Zulu Lima.
Singapore 478 Super, pushback approved, tail to the north. Singapore 478 Super, give way to aircraft on your right. Give way to aircraft.
Singapore Changi ground, Etihad 616 flight of 5, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway.
Etihad 616 flight of 5, pushback approved, tail to the east. Singapore 015 Heavy, pushback approved, tail to the south.
Pushback approved, tail to the east, Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Shamrock 220 Super, you're on an active airport, please contact Singapore Changi ground on 124.3.
Pushback approved, tail to the south, Singapore 015 Heavy.
Singapore 63 Heavy, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor, Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready.
Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 21 Heavy, ready to taxi to runway 2 center with information Sierra.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey 10, Singapore 63 Heavy.
Shamrock 220 Super, request frequency change.
Shamrock 220 Super, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor, Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey 10, Shamrock 220 Super.
Shamrock 220 Super, please expedite. Stand by, Scooter 0607 Heavy. Singapore 21 Heavy, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor 10, Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor 10, Whiskey 10, Singapore 21 Heavy.
Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 787 Heavy, ready to taxi with information Sierra.
Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 302, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 center. Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 955 Heavy, requests taxi to parking.
Singapore 787 Heavy, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor 10, Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready. Singapore 787 Heavy, give way to aircraft ahead. Give way to aircraft. Singapore 787 Heavy. Singapore 955 Heavy, taxi to F35 via Delta 5 Heavy, pushback approved, tail to the west.
Taxiing to F35 via Singapore 955 Heavy. Pushback approved, tail to the west, Delta 5 Heavy.
Singapore 302, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Pushback approved, tail to the north, Singapore 302.
Singapore 63 Heavy, contact Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6. November 949 Lima Oscar, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 773 Super, ready for pushback with information Sierra.
Singapore 773 Super, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Pushback approved, tail to the north, Singapore 773 Super. Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 656, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 left. Singapore 656, disregard last message. Singapore Changi ground, Singapore 656, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 center.
Scooter 0607 Heavy, please do not cut in line. Scooter 0607 Heavy, maintain safe distance with aircraft ahead please. Scooter 0607 Heavy.
Singapore Changi ground, Etihad 616 flight of 5, ready to taxi to runway 2 center with information Sierra.
Singapore 928 Victor Heavy, request frequency change.
Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey, Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Singapore 928 Victor Heavy, you were already instructed to change frequency.
Singapore Changi Ground, IFLI 772, request taxi to G14 at the other terminals.
iFly 772, taxi to B3 via Whiskey. Pakistan 163, pushback approved, tail to the west.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 015 Heavy, ready to taxi with information Sierra.
Pushback approved, tail to the west, Pakistan 163. Singapore 015 Heavy, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Singapore 015 Heavy.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 773 Super, ready to taxi with information Sierra. Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 302, ready to taxi to runway 2 center with information Sierra.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 478 Super, ready to taxi to runway 2 left with information Sierra. Singapore 773 Super, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Singapore 773 Super. Singapore Changi Ground, Delta 5 Heavy, ready to taxi with information Sierra.
Singapore 478 Super, contact Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 656, ready to taxi with information Sierra.
Contacting Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6. Singapore 478 Super.
Singapore Changi Ground, November 949 Lima Oscar, ready to taxi to runway 2 left with information Sierra.
Singapore 302, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor, Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey 10, Singapore 302.
November 949 Lima Oscar, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor, Whiskey, contact tower when ready.
Singapore Changi Ground, Air India 836 Heavy, ready for pushback with information Sierra.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey, November 949 Lima Oscar.
Singapore Changi Ground, Zulu Romeo Alpha Juliet, request taxi to E28 at the other terminals.
Air India 836 Heavy, hold position.
Holding position, Air India 836 Heavy. Holding position, Delta 5 Heavy.
Zulu Romeo Alpha Juliet, taxi to waypoint via Air India 836 Heavy, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Taxiing to waypoint via Zulu Romeo Alpha Juliet. Pushback approved, tail to the north, Air India 836 Heavy. Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 656, ready to taxi to runway 2 left with information Sierra. Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 351 Juliet Heavy, request taxi to D47 at the other terminals.
Singapore 656, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Singapore 656.
Singapore Changi Ground, Delta 908, ready for pushback with information Sierra. Singapore 351 Juliet Heavy, taxi to D47 via Delta 908, pushback approved, tail to the east.
Taxiing to D47 via Singapore 351 Juliet Heavy.
Pushback approved, tail to the east, Delta 908.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 001 Super, request taxi to parking.
Attention all aircraft, airport is busy, expect delays.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 203, ready for pushback.
Singapore 203, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Singapore 302, request frequency change.
Singapore Changi Ground, Pakistan 163, ready to taxi with information Sierra.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 351 Juliet Heavy, request taxi to D41 at the other terminals.
Zulu Romeo Alpha Juliet, taxi to parking, at your discretion.
Pushback approved, tail to the north, Singapore 203.
Delta 5 Heavy, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready.
Taxi to parking, Zulu Romeo Alpha Juliet. Taxiing to runway 2 center via Delta 5 Heavy.
Singapore 302, you were already instructed to change frequency.
I'm sorry, Singapore 302.
Singapore Changi Ground, Qatari 366, ready for pushback with information Sierra. Singapore 0012, Etihad 616 flight of 5, taxi to waypoint via Pakistan.
Taxiing to waypoint via Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Singapore 38, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Pushback approved. Tail to the north. Singapore 38. Singapore Changi Ground. Singapore 971. Request taxi to C1 at the other terminals.
Air India 836 heavy, hold position.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 78, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 left.
Air India 836 heavy, hold position.
Holding position, Air India 836 heavy.
Singapore 78, hold position.
Holding position.
Etihad 616 flight of 5, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor, Whiskey, contact tower when ready. Singapore 971.
Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey, Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Taxiing to C1 via Singapore 971.
Attention all aircraft, airport is busy, expect delays. Attention all aircraft, check ATIS frequency for airport information.
Thank you. Good day. Singapore 971.
Singapore Changi Ground, Qatari 366, ready to taxi to runway 2 left with information Sierra. Singapore 351 Juliet Heavy, taxi to D41 via Qatari 366, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready.
Singapore Changi Ground. Singapore 38. Ready to taxi to runway 2 center with information Sierra.
Singapore 38, taxi to runway 2 left, contact tower when ready. Taxiing to runway 2 center via Qatari 366. Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 center. Singapore Changi Ground, Delta 908, ready to taxi with information Sierra. Air India 836 Heavy, taxi to runway 2 left, contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 left. Singapore 38.
Delta 908, runway 2 left, taxi via Victor, Whiskey, Whiskey 10, contact tower when ready. Taxiing to runway 2 left via Victor, Whiskey, Whiskey 10, Delta 908. Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec, pushback approved, tail to the north. Pushback approved, tail to the north. Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec.
Singapore Changi Ground, Pakistan 163, ready to taxi with information Sierra.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 203, ready to taxi.
Singapore 38, runway 2 center, taxi via Victor, contact tower when ready. Singapore 78, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Victor. Singapore 38. Singapore Changi Ground, American 1549, ready for pushback with information Sierra.
Singapore Changi Ground, Indonesia 069 Heavy, ready for pushback with information Sierra.
Pakistan 163, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready. Singapore 203, runway 2 center, taxi via contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Pakistan 163.
Indonesia 069 Heavy, hold position. American 1549, hold position.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Singapore 203.
Holding position. American 1549.
Holding position, Indonesia 069 Heavy.
Singapore Changi Ground, Qatari 366, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 left. Qatari 366, hold position. Attention all aircraft, airport is busy, expect delays. Attention all aircraft, no pattern work accepted at this time. Singapore Changi Ground, Qatari 366, ready for pushback with information Sierra. Qatari 366, pushback approved, tail to the north. Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 28 Kilo Super, ready for pushback with information Sierra.
Singapore Changi Ground, Yemeni 708, request taxi to F33 at the other terminals.
Singapore 38, runway 2 center, taxi via Victor, contact tower when ready. Pushback approved, tail to the north, Qatari 366. Yemeni 708, taxi to F33 via.
Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 511, request taxi to C24 at the other terminals.
Singapore 28 Kilo Super, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Taxiing to F33 via Yemeni 708.
Singapore 511, taxi to C24 via.
Taxiing to C24 via Singapore 511.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Victor, Singapore 38.
Pushback approved, tail to the north, Singapore 78. Taxiing to D41 via Singapore 351 Juliet Heavy.
Pushback approved, tail to the north, Singapore 28 Kilo Super.
Singapore Changi Ground,
Singapore 78, runway 2 center, taxi via Victor, contact tower when ready.
Taxiing to runway 2 center via Victor, Singapore 78.
Singapore Changi traffic, Scooter 0607 Heavy is taking off runway 2 left, departing straight out.
Singapore Changi traffic, headaches 2117 is on final, runway 2 center.
Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 015 Heavy, ready for departure at runway 2 center, departing north.
Singapore Changi Tower, Shamrock 220 Super, ready for departure in sequence at runway 2 left, departing straight out. Singapore 11 Heavy, you are in an active airspace. Please contact Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6. Singapore Changi Tower, headaches 9013, inbound on the ILS runway 2 center. Shamrock 220 Super, hold short of runway 2 left. Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 78, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing straight out. Holding short runway 2 left, Shamrock 220 Super. Headaches 9013, wind 360 at 8, number 2, runway 2 center, clear to land. Number 2, clear to land, runway 2 center, headaches 9013. Singapore Changi Tower, November 404 Guru Lima, ready for departure in sequence at runway 2 left, departing east. Singapore 015 Heavy, hold short of runway.
Holding short runway 2 center, Singapore 015 Heavy.
Singapore 1, Wilco, Singapore 11 Heavy. Singapore Changi Tower, American 497, inbound. Singapore Changi Tower, Shamrock 220 Super, ready for departure in sequence.
Singapore Changi traffic. Singapore Changi Ground, Singapore 9 Mike India Heavy, ready for pushback with information Sierra, requesting runway 2 center. Singapore Changi Ground, American 154.
Singapore Changi Tower, Shamrock 220 Super, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing straight out. Etihad 616 flight of 5, request frequency change.
Pushback approved. Tail to the north. American 1549. Pushback approved. Tail to the north. Singapore 9 Mike India Heavy.
Tax.
Attention all aircraft. No pattern work accepted at this time. Attention all aircraft. Check ATIS frequency for airport information.
Pushback approved. Tail to the north. Singapore 424.
Malay.
American 497, wind 360 at 8, number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Singapore Changi Tower. Shamrock 220 Super. Ready for departure in sequence at runway 2 left. Departing straight out. Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 left, American 497. Singapore Changi Tower. FedEx 9013, inbound on the ILS runway 2 center.
FedEx 9013, wind 360 at 8, number 1, runway 2 center, cleared to land. Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 015 Heavy, ready for departure at runway 2 center, departing north.
Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 center, FedEx 9013. Thank you, FedEx 9013.
Singapore 015 Heavy, hold short.
Etihad 616 flight of 5, request permission to cross runway 2 left. Singapore Changi Tower. Etihad 616 flight of 5, ready for departure in sequence at runway 2 left. Departing straight out.
Singapore 015 Heavy, line up and wait runway 2 center. Line up and wait runway 2 center, Singapore 015 Heavy. FedEx 90. Etihad 616 flight of. Etihad 6.
Holding short runway 2 left. Etihad 616 flight of 5.
American 497, when able turn right and contact ground. Please expedite. Traffic on final. Singapore 465, wind 360 at 8, number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Wilco, American 497.
Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 left, Singapore 465.
Singapore 015 Heavy, wind 000 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff. Fly runway heading until at or above 5,000 feet. Cleared for takeoff. Runway 2 center, Singapore 015 Heavy, Delta 5 Heavy, line up and wait runway 2 center.
Line up and wait runway 2 center, Delta 5 Heavy. Singapore Changi Tower. November 404 Zulu Lima, ready for departure in sequence at runway 2 left. Departing east.
November 404 Zulu Lima, hold short of runway 2 left. Shamrock 220 Super, wind 000 at 8, runway 2 left, cleared for takeoff.
Holding short runway 2 left, November 404 Zulu Lima. Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 left, Shamrock 220 Super. Singapore Changi Tower. Singapore 76 Super, inbound on the ILS runway 2 center.
Singapore Changi Tower, KLMA 35 Heavy, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left.
Singapore Changi Tower. Singapore 656, ready for departure at runway 2 center. Departing north.
Singapore 015 Heavy, frequency change approved, good day. Frequency change approved Singapore 015 Heavy, good day. Singapore 656, hold short of runway 2 center.
Holding short runway 2 center. Singapore 656. Singapore Changi Tower. Singapore 319 Super, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left.
Delta 5 Heavy, wind 000 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 center, Delta 5 Heavy.
Singapore 319 Super, wind 360 at 8, number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 left, Singapore 319 Super.
Shamrock 220 Super, frequency change approved, good day. Singapore 656, line up and wait runway 2 center.
Frequency change approved Shamrock 220 Super, good day. Line up and wait runway 2 center, Singapore 656.
Singapore 76 Super, wind 360 at 8. Number 1, runway 2 center, cleared to land. KLM 835 Heavy, wind 360 at 8. Number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 center, Singapore 76 Super.
Number 1, clear to land, runway 2 left, KLM 835 Heavy.
Singapore 465, when able turn right and contact ground. Please expedite, traffic on final.
Wilco, Singapore 465.
Delta 5 Heavy, frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved Delta 5 Heavy, good day.
Singapore Changi Tower, Qatari 366, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing north.
Singapore Changi Tower, New Zealand 284 Heavy, inbound on the ILS runway 2 center. Singapore 656, wind 000 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff. Qatari 366, hold short of runway 2 left.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 center, Singapore 656. Singapore Changi Tower, November 404 Zulu Lima, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing east.
Singapore 787 Heavy, line up and wait runway 2 left.
Holding short runway 2 left, Qatari 366.
November 404 Zulu Lima, hold short of runway 2 left.
Holding short runway 2 left, November 404 Zulu Lima.
New Zealand 284 Heavy, wind 360 at 8. Number 2, runway 2 center, cleared to land. Number 2, cleared to land, runway 2 center, New Zealand 284 Heavy. Singapore 319 Super, when able turn right and contact ground. Please expedite, traffic on final. Singapore 422 Sierra Quebec Heavy, wind 360 at 8. Number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land. Singapore 422 Sierra Quebec Heavy, correction, stand by. Singapore 422 Sierra Quebec Heavy, wind 360 at 8. Number 2, runway 2 left, cleared to land. Number 2, cleared to land, runway 2 left, Singapore 422 Sierra Quebec Heavy. KLM 835 Heavy, maintain slowest practical speed. Singapore 787 Heavy, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 left, cleared for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 left, Singapore 787 Heavy.
Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 302, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing straight out.
Singapore 656, frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved Singapore 656, good day.
Singapore 302, hold short of runway 2 left.
Holding short runway 2 left, Singapore 302.
Singapore 203, line up and wait runway 2 center.
Line up and wait runway 2 center, Singapore 203.
Singapore 787 Heavy, frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved Singapore 787 Heavy, good day. Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec, ready for departure at runway 2 center, departing east.
Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec, hold short of runway 2 center. November 404 Zulu Lima, line up and wait runway 2 left.
Line up and wait runway 2 left, November 404 Zulu Lima.
Holding short runway 2 center, Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec.
Singapore 203, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 center, Singapore 203. Singapore Changi Tower, November 404 Zulu Lima, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing east.
KLM 835 Heavy, when able turn right and contact ground. Please expedite, traffic on final.
Wilco, KLM 835 Heavy.
November 404 Zulu Lima, hold short of runway 2 left.
November 404 Zulu Lima, correction, stand by. Singapore Changi Tower, November 404 Zulu Lima, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing east.
Singapore 203, frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved Singapore 203, good day.
November 404 Zulu Lima, avoid sending duplicate messages. November 404 Zulu Lima, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 left, cleared for takeoff.
Airplane 1985 X-ray is on final runway 2 center. Full stop.
Singapore Changi Tower, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff. Airplane 1985 X-ray, roger. Airplane 1985 X-ray, wind 370 at 8, number 1, runway 2 center, cleared to land.
Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 center, Airplane 1985 X-ray.
Singapore Changi Tower, Philippines 511, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left.
Philippines 511, wind 370 at 8, number 2, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Number 2, clear to land, runway 2 left, Philippines 511.
New Zealand 284 Heavy, when able turn left and contact ground. Please expedite, traffic on final. Walco, New Zealand 284 Heavy. Philippines 511, maintain slowest practical speed.
Maintain slowest practical speed, Philippines 511.
Qatari 366, line up and wait runway 2 left.
Line up and wait runway 2 left, Qatari 366.
Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec, line up and wait runway 2 center.
Line up and wait runway 2 center, Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec.
Singapore 422 Sierra Quebec Heavy, when able turn right and contact ground. Please expedite, traffic on final. Airplane 1985 X-ray, when able turn left and contact ground. Please expedite, traffic on final.
Wilco, Airplane 1985 X-ray.
Singapore Changi Tower, Pakistan 163, ready for departure in sequence of runway 2 center, departing straight up.
Pakistan 163, hold short of runway 2 center.
Holding short runway 2 center, Pakistan 163.
Philippines 511, go around, make left traffic runway 2 left. Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff. Pakistan 163, line up and wait runway 2 center.
Going around, make left traffic runway 2 left, Philippines 511. Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 center, Singapore 004 Sierra Quebec.
Line up and wait runway 2 center, Pakistan 163.
Singapore Changi traffic, Jetstar Asia 788 is on final, runway 2 center.
Singapore Changi traffic, Pakistan 163 is taking off runway 2 center, departing north.
Singapore Changi traffic. Qatari 366 is taking off runway 2 left, departing north.
Singapore Changi traffic. Singapore 8 Super is taking off runway 2 center, remaining in the pattern.
Singapore Changi traffic. Etihad 616 flight of 5 is taking off runway 2 left, remaining in the pattern. Singapore Changi ground. Singapore 38, ready for pushback with information Tango.
Singapore 38, give way to aircraft on your left. Singapore 38, pushback approved, tail to the north.
Give way to aircraft. Singapore 38.
Singapore 38, disregard last message. American 1549, give way to aircraft on your right.
Give way to aircraft. American 1549.
Pushback approved, tail to the north. Singapore 38. Stand by. Singapore 38.
Attention all aircraft, airport is busy, expect delays. Singapore 38, continue taxi.
Continue taxi. Singapore 38.
Jetstar Asia 788, give way to aircraft on your right. Singapore Changi Tower, Air France 256 Alpha Heavy, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left with information Tango.
Singapore 955. When 8.
Singapore Changi Tower. Etihad 616 flight of 5, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing straight out. Wilco, Singapore 955.
Singapore 8 Super. Frequency change approved. Good day.
Singapore Changi Tower, rating Raptor 01 flight of 2 is 10 nautical miles to the southwest at 1,900 feet, inbound for landing, requesting runway 2 left. Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 421, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left.
Air France 256 Alpha Heavy. When able turn right. Contact ground on the taxiway.
Wilco, Air France 256 Alpha Heavy.
Rating Raptor 01 flight of 2, wind 010 at 8, number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 left, rating Raptor 01 flight of 2.
Singapore 421, wind 010 at 8, number 2, runway 2 left, cleared to land. Batik 13 Alpha, Etihad 616 flight of 5, hold short of runway 2 left.
Holding short runway 2 left, Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Batik 13 Alpha, wind 010 at 8, number 1, runway 2 left, cleared to land. Number 1, cleared to land, runway 2 left, Batik 13 Alpha. Frequency change approved Singapore 8 Super, good day. Qatari 366. Frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved Qatari 366, good day.
Singapore 8 Super, frequency change approved, good day. Frequency change approved Singapore 8 Super, good day.
Singapore Changi Tower, United 2 Heavy, ready for departure at runway 2 center, departing east.
United 2 Heavy, hold short of runway 2 center.
Holding short runway 2 center, United 2 Heavy.
Batik 13 Alpha, when able turn right and contact ground. Please expedite. Wilco, Batik 13 Alpha. United 2 Heavy, line up and wait runway 2 center.
Line up and wait runway 2 center, United 2 Heavy.
UPS 797 Uniform Papa Heavy, when able turn left and contact ground. Please expedite.
Wilco, UPS 797 Uniform Papa Heavy.
Singapore Changi Tower, November 137 Echo Victor, inbound on the visual runway 2 left with information Sierra.
United 2 Heavy, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 center, United 2 Heavy.
Singapore 38, line up and wait runway 2 center. Rating Raptor 01 flight of 2, when able turn right, contact ground on the taxiway. Line up and wait runway 2 center, Singapore 38.
Singapore Changi Tower, Air Force 433 is 12 nautical miles to the southwest at 2000 feet, inbound for landing with information Tango, requesting runway 2 center.
Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 712, inbound on the ILS runway 2 center. Singapore 712, wind 010 at 8, number 1, runway 2 center, cleared to land. November 137 Echo Victor, number 2, traffic to follow is on final.
Air Force 433, emergency fuel, 4 minutes remaining.
Air Force 433, number 2, traffic to follow is on final.
Number 2, behind the traffic on final, Air Force 433.
Air Force 433, wind 010 at 8, number 2, runway 2 center, cleared to land. Singapore 20 Super, wind 010 at 8, number 3, runway 2 left, cleared to land. United 2 Heavy, frequency change approved, good day. Singapore 38, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 center, cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 center, Singapore 38.
Frequency change approved United 2 Heavy, good day. Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 478 Super, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing east.
Singapore 478 Super, hold short of runway 2 left.
Holding short runway 2 left, Singapore 478 Super.
Singapore Changi Tower, United 773, inbound on the ILS runway 2 center.
Singapore Changi Tower, November 374 Guru Mike flight of 3, ready for departure at runway 2 center, departing north.
Singapore 421, when able turn right, contact ground on the taxiway.
Wilco, Singapore 421.
Singapore 712, when able turn left and contact ground. Please expedite. American 1549, hold short of runway 2 center. Holding short runway 2 center, American 1549. United 773, wind 010 at 8, number 2, runway 2 center, clear to land. Wilco, Singapore 712. November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, hold short of runway 2 center.
Holding short runway 2 center, November 374 Guru Mike flight of 3.
Number 2, clear to land. Runway 2 center, United 773. Singapore 38, frequency change approved. Good day.
Singapore Changi Tower, Etihad 616 flight,
Etihad 616 flight of 5.
line up and wait runway 2 left, Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Singapore Changi Tower, Philippines 511, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left.
Singapore Changi Tower, Italy 1029, inbound on the ILS runway 2 left. Italy 1029, wind 010 at 8, number 2, runway 2 left, cleared to land.
Wilco, November 137 Echo Victor.
Philippines 511, wind 010 at 8, number 3, runway 2 left, cleared to land. Air Force 433, when able turn left and contact ground, please expedite. Etihad 616 flight of 5, wind 010 at 8, runway 2 left, cleared for takeoff.
Thank you. Cleared for takeoff, runway 2 left, Etihad 616 flight of 5.
Singapore Changi Tower, Singapore 28 Kilo Super, ready for departure at runway 2 left, departing west.
Singapore 28 Kilo Super, hold short of runway 2 left.
Holding short runway 2 left, Singapore 28 Kilo Super.
Etihad 616 flight of 5, frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved, Etihad 616 flight of 5, good day.
Etihad 616 flight of 5, contact. Etihad 616 flight of 5, contact Singapore approach on 124.6.
Contacting Singapore approach on 124.6, Etihad 616 flight of 5. Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super, descend and maintain 3000.
Contacting Singapore approach on 124.6, Singapore 38. Descend and maintain 3000, Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super.
Singapore 359 Heavy, descend and maintain 2000. Etihad 616 flight of 5 is 6 nautical miles north of Singapore Changi at 4600 feet. Etihad 616 flight of 5, roger, proceed on course, Etihad 616 flight of 5. Singapore 421 Super, turn left heading 090, descend and maintain 3000.
Turn left heading 090, descend and maintain 3000, Singapore 421 Super.
Singapore 359 Heavy, maintain 2000, maintain 2000 until established on the localizer, clear eyes runway 2 center approach. Maintain 2000, maintain 2000 until established on the localizer, clear eyes runway 2 center. Singapore 359 Heavy, Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super, turn left heading 050, descend and maintain 3000, maintain 3000 until established on the localizer, clear eyes runway 2 left approach. Singapore 421 Super, do not exceed 200 knots.
Do not exceed 200 knots. Singapore 421 Super.
Turn left heading 050, descend and maintain 3000, maintain 3000 until established on the localizer, cleared oils runway 2 left, Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super.
Singapore 421 Super, turn right heading 110.
Turn right heading 110, Singapore 421 Super.
American 1549 is 2 nautical miles northeast of Singapore Changi at 1,700 feet, requesting GPS approach runway 25 left at Los Angeles.
American 1549, please check the user guide from the home screen for help using ATC instructions. American 1549, continue as filed.
Continue as filed, American 1549.
Singapore 421 Super, turn left heading 050, descend and maintain 3000, maintain 3000 until established on the localizer, clear eyes runway 2 left approach.
Turn left heading 050, descend and maintain 3000, maintain 3000 until established on the localizer, cleared eyes runway 2 left, Singapore 421 Super.
Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super, speed at your discretion. Singapore 359 Heavy, contact Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6.
Roger, Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super.
Contacting Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6. Singapore 359 Heavy. Singapore 421 Super, do not exceed 180 knots.
Do not exceed 180 knots, Singapore 421 Super.
Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super, contact Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6.
Contacting Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6. Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super. Thank you, good day, Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super.
Singapore 093 Sierra Quebec Super, thank you.
Singapore approach, November 949 Lima Oscar, with you at 1800.
November 949 Lima Oscar, radar contact. November 949 Lima Oscar, continue as filed.
Continue as filed, November 949 Lima Oscar.
Singapore 421 Super, contact Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6.
Contacting Singapore Changi Tower on 118.6, Singapore 421 Super. Singapore approach, Singapore 28 Kilo Super, with you at 1600.
Singapore 28 Kilo Super, radar contact. Singapore 28 Kilo Super, continue as filed.
Continue as filed, Singapore 28 Kilo Super.
November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, turn right heading 030, climb and maintain flight level 180. Singapore
Hold,
38,
hold.
frequency change approved, good day. Unable, November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3.
Frequency change approved Singapore 38. Good day.
November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, please follow instructions.
FedEx 369 is 27 nautical miles southwest of Kluang at 20,200 feet, requesting Earls approach runway 2 left at Singapore Changi.
November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, requesting to divert to Flughafen Frankfurt. November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, turn right heading 040, climb and maintain flight level 180. Turn right heading 040, climb and maintain flight level 180, November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3. Headaches 369, continue as filed, expect BIL's approach runway 2 left at Singapore Changi.
Roger, FedEx 369.
Singapore approach, November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, with you at 4600. November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, radar contact. November 374 Zulu Mike flight of 3, please follow instructions or you will be reported.
Emirates 420 Victor Alpha Heavy is
Emirates 420 Victor Alpha Heavy, continue as filed, expect BIL's approach runway 2 center at Singapore Changi.
Roger, Emirates 420 Victor Alpha Heavy.
American 1549, frequency, Etihad 616 flight of 5, frequency change approved. Frequency change approved Etihad 616 flight of 5, good day.